Right now, I do want to get right into one of our top stories that we have been following here on Live Now, as President Trump says Andrew Wolfe, one of two National Guardsmen shot in a targeted attack in Washington, D.C. Wednesday, is in, quote, bad shape, but continues fighting for his life. The president made the comment as he revealed on Thanksgiving night that U.S. Army Specialist Sarah Beckstrom had died from her injuries suffered in that ambush. Take a listen.
I must unfortunately tell you that just seconds before I went on, right now, I heard that Sarah Beckstrom of West Virginia, one of the Guardsmen that we're talking about, highly respected, young, magnificent person, started service in June of 2023, outstanding in every way. She's just passed away. She's no longer with us. She's looking down at us right now. Her parents are with her. It's just happened. She was savagely attacked. She's dead. She's not with us. Incredible person. Outstanding in every single way, in every department. That's horrible.
And you are taking a look at these photos right here. These are coming in from DVIDS, the Defense Visual Information Distribution Center. Now, the suspect is seen here in this photo that was released by the FBI. We're talking about Rahmanullah Lakanwal, identified by federal investigators as the suspect. They say he's a 29-year-old Afghan national who worked with the CIA in his native country and moved to the U.S. in 2021. The FBI saying that he drove from Washington state to the nation's capital to commit what President Trump described as a, quote, terrorist attack. There's a lot to discuss as this investigation does continue to unravel. I do want to bring in Jeff Wenninger, former LAPD lieutenant and founder and CEO of Law Enforcement Consultants. Jeff, thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to join us here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Of course. And first off, I did want to ask you if you can kind of break down so far the information that we've learned from this investigation, all of this, of course, happening less than 48 hours ago. What information has stood out to you so far?
Well, really, it's not the information that we've received. It's the information that is absent, that we don't have. There has not been a heck of a lot said about his motivation. And that is a little strange considering the fact that we do have him in custody, because that gives us the opportunity to interrogate him. And by doing that, we can learn a lot about what his motives were, what made him perhaps become radicalized, what his ideological perspective was, and, you know, what kind of planning took place for this to occur. And it's that sort of thing, as well as what we'll be doing, looking into all the technological stuff, looking at social media, and looking at the data and the behavioral evidence that we have that will give us some type of insight into what was the motivation, because that is really what people want to know.
And we've heard from President Trump, really, and others there who do say that this was a terrorist attack. How do investigators go about determining whether or not this is terrorism?
Well, there's a pretty clear definition of a terrorist incident, and that's when somebody uses violence to instill fear for a political purpose. And it pretty clearly appears to be that way based on the background of this individual and the type of targeted attack on an authority figure here in the United States, these unfortunate National Guard members. And, you know, as long as you're not looking at something that's like a typical crime, or there's an obvious evidence where there's a type of a dispute, or there's a being committed for monetary gain, everything tends to lean towards the fact that this is a terrorist incident.
Again, as I mentioned, we are less than 48 hours after all of this did unfold there in the nation's capital. What is it that investigators right now, based on your experience, are likely focused on?
Well, I think what they're really going to be focused on is, like I said, about the motivation. They're going to be talking to the people that are closest to him, family members, colleagues, friends, anybody he would have associated with. But more importantly, they're going to be looking at the open source type of things. What sort of things had he posted on social media or in chat groups? Things that they can assess and look at to determine what was his motivation, where did he go wrong, what was the radicalization that caused him to have this ideological perspective where he would carry out such a violent type of an incident on innocent people.
And what you're looking at right now are the photos of those National Guardsmen who were shot. Sarah Beckstrom, unfortunately, passing away yesterday. Andrew Wolfe fighting for his life, according to President Trump, as he was last listed there in a hospital in critical condition. Now, as we watch kind of all of this play out and the information does develop, how are federal investigators going to work there with local investigators, again, based on your experience overall? Because as you mentioned, federal investigators right now likely focused on just kind of piecing together a motive.
Well, we have the FBI, who's going to be the head of this total investigation, and you have the terrorism task force, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, that's going to be working cooperatively with local, state, federal, as well as actually international resources. And they're going to be putting together what's like data fusion. So you're gathering all of this various information from sources that all need to be brought together and then analyzed. And then you analyze it through the sharing of that information, and you can come up with some type of a picture that can give you an idea or a little bit of insight into what motivated this individual to commit this heinous act.
And you did kind of already talk about this. I want to go in reverse just a little bit here, because we discussed what the potential motive was, and obviously the investigation is still playing out. You said it's not really about what we do know, but what we don't know. And as I mentioned, I want to go back. What do you think of the flow of information so far from law enforcement to members of the media, but also the public who have those questions? We know that there's been a news conference that was held on the day of, and then yesterday on Thanksgiving Day, we actually heard from FBI Director Kash Patel and the U.S. Attorney for D.C., Jeanine Pirro. So what do you think about the flow of information?
Well, one thing that we have to keep in mind is information is important. And it's not only important that citizens get information so they can maintain a trust of the law enforcement entities that are conducting this investigation. However, we have to understand that there are reasons and legitimate reasons why law enforcement would withhold information. And that would be to protect the integrity of the investigation, and as well as to prevent panic. If there's some type of information that, if released, would cause people to create rumors and innuendo and panic within our country, we want to avoid that. And it's really a balance between giving out the information to the citizens so they can make personal safety decisions, but also keeping them in a position where they're safe to continue to live their lives and not worry about potential threats. And it's really a balance. But the fact that there are some things that have not been mentioned in regards to the extent of the knowledge of the motivation, it tends to suggest to me that there's either something, one, potentially, that would be embarrassing to a law enforcement organization relative to what has been determined in an investigation, or they're trying to maintain the integrity of the investigation, or they want to prevent some type of panic.
What sort of role would you say, again, based in your experience, that maybe social media does play in the flow of information? Because you have people who are posting different information on X, on Threads, all of those different platforms, and a lot of it not confirmed. And I'm not just talking about maybe journalists there, but other folks who are hearing things from different sources and think, well, this is accurate. You have just everyday folks out there who are sharing it, and then it gets shared all over. So what kind of role does that play, and does that make it a little bit more difficult for investigators who are working this investigation?
Well, the key is that you complete a thorough, complete, and accurate investigation, and that the information that is appropriate to be released is released. Basically, citizens want to feel safe, heard, and respected. And that requires that there'll be trust built between the law enforcement agencies and the communities they serve. And the reality is that desire for this information is important to satisfy to the extent where it's appropriate. And it's a challenge, and it's a challenge that law enforcement has had, because over a period of time, we can look back at the Charlie Kirk incident, where we had the release of information that we had 2 people that were in custody that turned out to be erroneous. In this incident, we were told initially that both of the individuals that were shot had passed away, and it turned out not to be accurate at all. So in my experience, the reality is it takes time for information to come in, to be analyzed and corroborated before it's appropriate to release it. The reality is lies or inaccurate information can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting its shoes on.
And that's incredibly accurate there. And we are taking a look at some of the video from Wednesday as all of this did unfold here. What questions do you hope could potentially be answered by law enforcement? As we mentioned, there's a lot that we are still waiting to find out. But as we are now getting close to that 48-hour mark, what information might be released today if there is another news conference? What are you hoping to hear?
Well, I would hope to hear a little bit more about the motivation for this attack. I would also like to know to what extent other people may have been involved. My first reaction when I saw this occur and I was watching it on television was, to what extent was the scope and severity of this incident? Was this something that occurred where they could just draw in the authorities and then perhaps another incident occur, or is this something that we can expect to be occurring routinely, and this involves more than just one individual? Yes, this incident may have just occurred with this individual, but he may be a part of a larger network that has planned things out from this point forward, and we need to be making sure that we're taking the measures possible to prevent those incidents from occurring.
And you bring up a good point. I want to go a little bit deeper into that, because we've heard from the FBI multiple times. They said, quote unquote, this was a lone gunman. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't other people involved at a distance, maybe in planning or things of that nature. It just means that one person carried out the actual attack, correct?
That's correct. This would be very similar to, say, school shootings. In 4 out of 5 school shootings, there's at least one person that knows of the intention of the shooter prior to the incident occurring. And that's not much unlike this type of a scenario. So there are going to be people that, at a minimum, knew that this person had intentions to carry out this type of an act. To the extent, are they criminally culpable? The investigation will determine that. But they certainly are open to that being a potential possibility.
When you're talking about National Guardsmen or some kind of federal official who is involved in a shooting like this, does that change the investigation in any way compared to maybe some other person who was shot and killed? Is there any difference when you get into the investigation itself?
Well, in this case, we had National Guard members that were part of a federal deployment. So the FBI will handle the oversight of the investigation with the Joint Terrorism Task Force. And you have a multiple number of entities, of federal entities, from the ATF and the DEA and all of them that will be involved with this, to include the local, state, and also, because we're talking about somebody that was a national person from another country, that you're going to involve international law enforcement entities as well to try to piece together everything to determine what kind of travel this individual had, what type of interactions he had, and who he surrounded himself by.
All right. Jeff Wenninger, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We definitely always appreciate you being here. Anything we missed, anything that you want to add before I let you go?
You know, I just want to say this, is that my thoughts and prayers are with the families of the 2 National Guard members, as well as all of the National Guard members and law enforcement officers throughout this country that are serving during this very trying time.
Yeah, and it's a very heartbreaking situation. And of course, we do expect that we will get potentially some more information from federal officials later on today. Thank you again for taking the time to be here with us. We definitely appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me.